Hi there. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast with Lisa Schlossberg. I'm your host, Lisa Schlossberg, a licensed social worker, certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. If you, like I have, struggle with your relationship with food, eating, and body image, I am here with this podcast to guide you into healing the relationship you have with yourself through a trauma-informed, holistic, and mind-body-soul approach. Together, we can support you in building a lifestyle of more peace, freedom, safety, and power. Hello again, and welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. This is me, Lisa Schlossberg, your host, and we are back. We are back again today with chapter 10, actually. And gosh, there is so much to say. The first is, as I was thinking about when I first realized that I was on episode 10 of this, the first thing that I thought of was the day that I turned 5 years old. I don't have a lot of those memories, but I do remember that the day I turned 5 years old, my dad was very excited to celebrate that I was finally a whole hand. I remember sitting with him and he held his hand up and he was like, "You've made it. You are a whole hand. You're a full 5. And when I realized that we were at episode 10 of this series, that's where my brain went, and I just wanted to share that with you. So we are not just through one whole hand. Today, we have made it to 2 whole hands. That is exciting. So that was my first thought, and what I'm going to do now, I guess there's a bit of a repetitive, I don't want to say agenda here, but what I like doing, I guess, apparently, is I'm going to start with my check-in as a human, some reflections about the personal experience I'm having going through this creative process, and then follow-up thoughts, and then with whatever time is left, potentially new thoughts and ideas. So let's do it. Let's do it. My reflection on this process throughout the week or so has been, it has shifted from I have all these ideas and I have all this stuff to say and, what if it's not good and what if it's not helpful and what if people don't like it and what if it ruffles feathers and what if I'm judged because of it and all this like fear and doubt. And then it became more so, this just feels important and I'm going to do this. But as I've shared with you, it was a little bit like kind of, I had to really psych myself up to do it some of the time. And sometimes even kind of begrudgingly showing up like, oh God, I don't know if I have time for this, or like, do I really have the energy for this? But it wants to come out. And so I'm going to let it out. And now I feel as though I've like finally arrived at this point where this feels like such a gift that I get to give myself. I'm just showing up to honor self-expression and giving myself a voice. And now, what I've been thinking about over the last week is like, this is my art. This is my art. This is the thing that I'm here to produce and create. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is. It doesn't matter if people like it. It doesn't matter. This is what I have to do for me. And the only thing worse than doing it, or like, kind of having to force myself some of the time to do it, the only thing worse than that is not doing it and keeping it all inside. And so I'm just very excited because now again, I'm at a point where I get very like happy. This brings me so much joy to step into this project and process. And I realized, again, I'm not these days a musician. Like I wasn't put here on this earth for that to be my contribution. Same with quote unquote art in terms of like, drawing and coloring and sculpting and painting and all that. Like, this is my art. This is what I get to be here to create. And so it just feels really fucking good at this point, I think is what I'm saying. And so today is a day where it's like I have a lot of work to do and there's a lot going on. I'm starting school again. There's a lot happening. And now when I see record a podcast episode on my calendar, it's like, yay. Like, let's fucking go. So that's how I'm showing up today. That's how I feel. That's my reflection. and we got a lot to cover, so let's do it. Okay, let me start by saying that from the first time I listened to the previous episode, I was like smiling to myself, and my response was 10 out of 10, no notes. No notes, just that's it. Speaks for itself. And then I had this inkling to go back to it. And I listened to it again, and I was like, "Oh gosh, there's so many notes. There's so many follow-up thoughts." So I think today is actually going to be getting deeper into some of those concepts before, again, we can move forward. And this is me, in some ways, modeling this process that I don't have total control over, because I want to get to some things, and I know I keep saying this, but I think that I want to really do my due diligence to lay the foundation, continue to lay the foundation for a lot of it, so that when we get there, you understand how to integrate it all. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay. So the first thing that I want to mention in kind of response to last week is when I was talking about the preparation stage of change and getting yourself prepared to know what you need to do, what are the skills and tools, what kind of education and support do you need, what kind of time do you need to carve out, like what kinds of things do you need to now more logistically. And one of the things that I realized is like, from like the preparation stage to me is where we start moving from mental, emotional, spiritual to physical. We take it into the physical dimension. What are the actual things that you are going to require to go on this journey of behavior change? So what I want to say is true for the preparation stage, but then also the maintenance and, importantly, the relapse stage. Like once you're doing the thing, you have to know things, like especially again in the preparation stage, you have to know things. If what you want, for example, and I heard myself say this, and this is what it made me think of, if what you want, for example, is to go to the gym and start working out, some of the time that's going to require not just like the right equipment and the right sneakers and the right clothing and the time and an actual space like a gym, but it's also going to require education and knowledge and potentially support, like in idea being a personal trainer. And what I wanted to add to that is because sometimes when I, share my story or like this, what I'm calling a blueprint for how to do it, sometimes what I hear are people being like, well, why do you just know? Like, how is it that you just know what to do and I have to learn it? And what I want to be really clear about is I also had to learn all of this. And when I was back in the day, I was starting to exercise. I did not know at all what I was doing. And so me being me at the time, I became a personal trainer. And the reason that I became a personal trainer was not just because I wanted to help other people, but it was largely because I wanted to know what I was doing. I wanted to know how to exercise my own body. I wanted to know how my body worked and how to do things like build muscle. And I had no idea how to do that. And this was at the end. So this was senior year of college. Senior year, the second semester of college for me, I was a part-time student because I had like finished up my credits, and I was doing, and this is what I was doing as the other part of my time. I was studying to be a personal trainer. And my weight loss, just to like give you context, my weight loss happened during my sophomore year. Junior year was recovering from an eating disorder and traveling the world, and I'll get back in more detail to that. But then it wasn't until the end of senior year that I actually learned how to do a lot of this. And so throughout that whole time, I was doing a lot of cardio because, again, cardio machines were straightforward to me. They all had a quick start button, and that's what I did for a very long time. And then I started doing Insanity, which is like the DVD at-home workout. And I'll, again, come back and say more about that. But But this is how I started like learning things. And so I just want to make it really clear, like, I'm not the exception to the rule. I'm not someone that like went to the gym and knew what to do. And for what it's worth, by the way, nobody ever went to the gym and just knew what to do with a dumbbell, even though that is a limiting belief a lot of us have. That is like, you should just know it. You shouldn't just know it. There's no way that you would just know it. And you not knowing it and you needing to be taught and trained and educated is part of the process. And I think sometimes, like, the reason I want to say all this is because, again, sometimes there's an expectation of you skipping over the preparation stage and just being in action. And it's very valid if what you need is not just, again, the physical, logistical equipment and things, but to be taught and trained. And so if you're wondering, how do I know all this? It's because I studied it. I had to actually study it. And so much of this is part of the story. I had to study how to be a personal trainer so I could learn how to train myself. And then I also became then a health coach and then a social worker and all of these things so that I could be putting it together. But I think that's important, is like, I also have not been able to skip over these steps. I just learned where I was ignorant, and I found ways to educate myself so I could do what I wanted to do. And by the way, I don't know if I've shared this story on the podcast at any point, but I've definitely talked about it over on Instagram. But just to give you an idea of what I was doing and what I was like in college, when I had lost all this weight, and then I realized, like, I really don't know anything about how to exercise, and I mean like strength train. And one of the things, okay, things are just coming to me as I say this. I remember one time I was doing Insanity, and again, this is like an at-home kind of DVD type workout. And when I was on semester at sea, which was the study abroad program I did, there was a crew of us that used to like to like do the DVD on the ship together, and we were working out together. And I remember it was one of the professors, I think, who like was doing it with us, or someone stopped me at one point and was like, do your knees ever hurt after you do this workout or like do squats and stuff? And I remember being like, yes, they do, constantly. And I think I, at that point, probably thought that the pain I got in my knees was just being sore from working out. Like, I had no idea. And I remember her saying to me, well, because your form when you're doing these squats is like, your knees, your heels are not on the ground and your knees are going so far past your toes that I would imagine it's like causing some pain. And I remember being like so grateful for this person going out of her way to be like, by the way, this is how you want your squats to look. And so as I was like exercising and doing these things, and yes, successfully losing weight and maintaining my weight fine, it was becoming more and more clear to me that I didn't really know how my body worked or how to move it or how to do it in a way that didn't injure me. And so I had to learn. And so then I get back to college, senior year, and this was when Tinder became a thing, around that time. And Tinder was a dating app. Tinder was like, I think, one of the first dating apps, and it was, anyway, whatever. So again, just to give you an idea of where I was at, I was kind of desperate to learn, or not desperate, I was eager. I wanted to learn things. And at this point, it didn't yet occur to me, I think, that I could study to become a personal trainer. And also, like, did I really want to do that? And, it costs money, and like, do I have time for that? All these things. And so I wasn't yet thinking about actually becoming a trainer. And what I did was I made a Tinder profile. And in my bio on Tinder, I made it explicitly clear that I did not want to date anyone or get romantically involved with anyone. The reason I was making a Tinder is because I wanted to meet guys that would take me to the gym and teach me how to lift weights. And that's what I did. And it worked a couple times. It did. Like, I remember actually, so I was at the University of Michigan, and one of the guys that like I connected with was, I think, a gymnast, like a on the gymnastics team at Michigan. And so I remember being like, okay, well, he definitely knows what's good when it comes to exercise. And so like literally we went to the gym together and he taught me how to lift weights. and then that was it. And then some of you have heard this story, the Dennis story. I met this guy, Dennis, the same way. And we went to this gym off campus and he taught me how to do a lot of the full body, like complex movements, squats, lunges, deadlifts, and bench press. And I got a full on education. It was like a half day one-on-one retreat. And I'm sure, come back and say more about Dennis and the impact that he has had on me. Some of you know that story, but I'm telling you this, which again was not at all part of the plan, because I didn't just know these things. I went very out of my way to get trained and educated and be taught and told what to do, because that's part of it. And so it also reminds me of a session I had recently with one of my clients, and what she was saying to me, one of my alumni clients, and what she was saying to me was, essentially, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right thing to do is. Should I do this? Should I do that? And it was coming from this place of fear, which it very often is. When we don't know what to do, it makes sense. We get kind of scared. And when we don't know how to guide ourselves, it can feel like we're really lost and stuck. And so we moved through, and I'm going to break this down for you step by step, because I think this really matters a lot. Then it became, okay, where are you feeling the emotional energy of this? So first identify it. When you hear this voice internally that says, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, what's the energy of that? What's the emotional experience of that? And she was able to identify fear, right? It feels scary that I don't know what to do. It feels scary that I don't have the answers, okay? Where do you feel that? In the body. And you can feel this in yourself whenever this comes up for you. A tingling, a tightness, you're holding your breath. Just start noticing the physiological response to you experiencing fear, and breathe into that. Let it be here. It doesn't need to go away. It's uncomfortable. You're not unsafe. You're feeling scared. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Regulate. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So once we moved through that, and then we got to revisit this voice of, I don't know what to do. And when we came back to it, and I said, okay, because this is how it works. Once you move that energy, or really let that energy move and be released, we can revisit it. And what she said to me was, I still don't know what to do. Like, I still don't know what the right thing to do is. I'm not terrified anymore. I'm not panicking about the fact that I don't know what to do. I don't feel so scared. But once that energy moves, what's left is, the truth is, I don't know what to do. And I thought that this was so important and so powerful, because the truth is, some of the time you don't know. Some of the time you don't know. You don't have the education. If someone said to me, Lisa, you're so brilliant and wise and you know so many things, can you conduct brain surgery on my child? I would say absolutely not. Not because I am inadequate as a human being, but because I don't have that training. I don't have that knowledge. I don't have that skill set. I don't have the education that I need to successfully do that. So no, I can't. And the reason is, I don't know how. And so when it comes to exercise, nutrition, taking care of yourself, very often it can be judged when we say, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. And it's like, sometimes it's like deep down, like, what to do. And sometimes it's like, what to do. And it's really the block is actually doing it because it doesn't feel safe. Okay, sure. And some of the time, I just want to validate that the answer is, you really do not know. And that's where it's very wise for you then to work with some sort of coach or teacher, or do some sort of course or program or whatever, so that you can learn, because you need like I've said a million times here, I really believe knowledge is power. And some of the time you need to know that you don't know. And if it's coming from that place, and that's why it's so important to do this kind of work around it, where you can say, I don't know what to do. I don't know, I want to go to the gym, but I don't know what to do. Okay. So you can feel the fear or whatever else you have around that, release that energy, and then come back to the truth that is, you need to be taught. And then this is all part of the preparation stage is, how do you want to learn? How do you want to learn? You want to cook. How do you want to learn how to do that? You want to watch some YouTube videos? You want to get a recipe? What do they call it? Cookbook? You want to follow a recipe. You want to ask a friend. You want to have someone come over and teach you something. Like, how do you want to do it? But if what you're trying to do is go from ignorance to action, you can't. And very often you're trying and then it feels like you're getting nowhere because of course you don't know what you're doing, right? It's like you're not going to put someone behind the wheel and be like, get on the highway when they're like, I've never learned how to drive. That's a very valid point you got there. And it's not because, again, you should already know. It's because you never went through the process of learning. So I think all of that matters because, again, one of the things that I did really right along the way was I identified what I didn't know. I didn't make meaning of it. I didn't sit around being like, I should know. How the fuck would I know all of this? And the truth is, frankly, I remember being at a point, especially when it came to how to take care of myself, I was at a point where I followed every rule. I did exactly what people told me to do. Lose weight, eat less, exercise more, and then that's it. You'll arrive at the finish line and then you'll be healthy. And at that point, I remember being like, you guys clearly don't know what you're talking about in terms of like the medical model. So I'm going to have to figure this out. And so I remember just being like, well, I definitely don't know how to exercise. I definitely don't know how to eat. All I've ever done is overeat or undereat. I don't know how to feel my feelings. Like I was so open to being ignorant where I was and getting help, reaching out to my therapist when I needed help, talking to a nutritionist because I had no idea how to eat. And Jenny Craig was not that helpful with that, So that's part of it. And as I'm talking about the stages of change and I'm thinking about like, where are people really getting stuck and what do we need to be told? I think a lot of it is you have to identify where I don't know what to do is not the voice of fear, it's the voice of truth. And sometimes it's both, and that's why it's about sitting with the energy around it and allowing that to be released so you can get to the truth. So again, I like really hope that makes sense, but I think that that's all important to know. And then another note that I had about that is when I was at this point, okay, so then I graduated college, I started working as a personal trainer, and at this point, again, there's just like so many things, as I'm saying all this out loud, there's so many things I want to say, one of which being, like, I remember at this point, I was still fairly dissociated from my body, but like, I'm coming back inside, I'm doing the work, but I remember specifically, for whatever reason, the chest press machine. And I remember sitting, this is how disconnected I was from my body, that sometimes I would ask the trainers that were training me. I did a lot of shadowing in the beginning before I was officially certified and working with people. And I remember at a point asking them, like, how do you know when you do a certain exercise what muscle group it's working? And some of the time the answer was, well, where do you feel it? Where do you feel it in your body? Like, where is it getting uncomfortable? Where is it getting sore? And I remember being like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what part of my body is being worked out because I don't feel it. And so I remember then, for, again, whatever reason, I remember the chest press machine where I would sit down on the machine. And this is, again, how I learned things. I would literally sit on machines and I would look at the pictures and I would see the part of the body, like the muscle group that was highlighted in the picture on the machine, and be like, oh, okay, all right, so that's the muscle group that I'm working. And then I would do a few chest press exercises and I would focus on my chest muscles, the pecs. And that's where I started like really building this connection between my mind and body. And so anyway, so that's what it was like in the beginning. Was like I didn't know anything. And then I also, for what it's worth, like I remember one time one of the guys that I met on Tinder he took me to Planet Fitness because he had the Planet Fitness membership where he could like bring unlimited amount of guests, and he was a personal trainer and he started teaching me how to do stuff, and he was very cute. And what I remember about one of our sessions together was we go up to this ab machine, and I remember being like, I want to learn how to use this ab machine. And he puts me on it, and there's like 3 different things to adjust. Like adjust the seat height, adjust like the length of the legs, or like whatever it was. There were a bunch of knobs. And I remember walking up to this machine with him, and he didn't know either. And at the time, I remember being like what I was thinking was like, okay, so this certified personal trainer just walked up to the machine and also doesn't know how it works. Okay. And then I watched him, and this was a very inspiring experience for me. I watched him experiment, trial and error. Pull the knob, push it over here, adjust it this way, get on the machine, realize that it was to this or to that, and then get off the machine and adjust it again. And he just like played with it, trial and error, here and there. And then eventually he was like, all right, cool. So this is how it works. And I remember the reason it was so inspiring to me was because I remember having this waking up moment that is a personal trainer doesn't always know how everything works. The difference between him and I in that scenario is that he felt confident to walk up to a machine and play with it and trial and error with it and fuck around with it until it made sense, until he understood how it was working. He had the knowledge to know the mechanics of the human body and how they needed to function to not be injured or hurt. But he didn't know everything. And I remember after this being like, that's it? That's the key to like knowing how to exercise, is that you're just willing to like be sloppy about it some of the time. And it was so enlightening to me. And so again, I'm saying all that because if you're in this place of like, you know, you go to a gym and you're like, I don't know how it works. Like, fuck it. No one ever knew how it worked the first time they did it. But if you are willing to show up and play with it a little bit or ask for some help, right? Be a little vulnerable and not a perfectionist and allow yourself to be a beginner. So much of this is mental and emotional. It's not physical. Then we learn what we need to learn. We acquire the skills that we need, and then we can get to things like action and maintenance. But all of this is because you cannot skip this stuff. So I don't know how in the world it's 27 minutes into this podcast, and this is what I've said so far. But you know what? I hope all this helps. But the other thing that I'm still trying to get to is that when I was at this point, okay, when I was at this point in my life where I'm like becoming a personal trainer and like hanging out with these Tinder guys who are teaching me how to lift weights and all of this, and then I'm starting to work with people, I also needed to sometimes practice treating myself like I was treating my clients. So I started having personal training clients. I was now a certified personal trainer. Then I was becoming a health coach. And I'm doing a lot of research. I'm studying things like the ACE study and, you know, like all these things are like how I'm spending my free time. And I'm learning a lot about the mind, body, soul system. And I was also really struggling a lot with my own recovery. So back to the story I shared last time about closing up my workout before I even really wanted to, and sitting with the emotional experience of feeling so unsafe to do less. What I had as a tool at this time in my life was that I had studied what to do. I had studied how to do it for other people. I had studied how to do it as a personal trainer so I could help other people. I was studying how to be a health coach so I could help other people. And then, like many of us in the helping profession, then I went to school to be trained as a therapist so that I could help other people because other people needed help. And what it then translated to is I started learning how to treat myself, because I was not the exception to the rule. I was just one of many, like the clients that I was working with. I was like all the other people, right? So it was dismantling the us versus them paradigm that I've said so much about. And here I was needing to treat myself like any of my clients. And the reason that this was super important for me at the time, and I think can be super important for you, is because in that experience where I felt emotionally like I was not doing enough, I also had the personal trainer brain in me that knew that if someone else were doing this workout, it would be too much. If someone else were eating the way that I found myself eating at some points at that period of time, it would be too little. And I now had this education on how to support other people with things like exercise and nutrition. And so that's kind of how my brain worked at the time, because I was so deliberately, intentionally choosing recovery. I didn't want to stay where I was. I didn't want my relationship with food and exercise in my body to feel how it felt. I wanted to get out of that. And so I had, again, this blueprint for, well, this is how I would treat other people. And then I had to weigh that against the way I was treating myself, and the way I'm doing this thing with my hands that you can't see, but like on one side of my brain, it was like what I was doing. And on the other side of my brain, it was what would be advisable for someone I was working with. And I used that very often as a way to kind of confront myself. That was like, you're doing too much. And the way that I know that you're doing too much. And it was ultimately what I'm saying is that this is how I was able, or a tool that supported me in being able to not make decisions based on how I felt. It's how I was able to feel my feelings emotionally, but not let them control everything, and not let my decisions be coming from a place of fear, scarcity, lack, inadequacy, insecurity. The way that I was able to keep some of my decisions objective, the reason I was able to say, you need to eat more, even though I felt really unsafe to do so, the way that I got myself to exercise less and track less and weigh myself less was by saying, if you knew anyone, if any of your clients were doing this, you would be able to identify that this was problematic or unhealthy or harmful. And so, Lisa, you are not the exception. This is true for you too. And again, that was major in my own recovery, because if I left it, and I think this is the point of so much of it, if I left it to, exercise to, if I let my emotions dictate how much I exercised or how much I ate, I was doing a really unhealthy thing. And so having this kind of education allowed me then to pull myself out of behaving emotionally and behave ultimately in a way that was in alignment with my recovery and my health and my well-being. And so the reason that I'm including that here is because I do think very often that it can be helpful to depersonalize it a bit. And we talk about this a lot. We've already said this when it comes to self-compassion. If you find that it feels difficult or impossible to treat yourself with compassion, which is really what all of this is and was, if you find that really hard to do, sometimes it can be so helpful to say, well, how would I treat a friend? How would I talk to someone I love? If this were my daughter, my best friend, what would I say to them? What would I advise them to do? And that kind of distance from it. So it's not, and sometimes this also could be judged as dissociation. And it's like, that's not what this is. If you're using it as a tool, to say, if someone else were doing this, it wouldn't be okay. If someone else were doing this, it would be too much. It would be too little. It would be, if you can see that truth for someone else, sometimes that's the only way that it becomes possible. Like it's an in for you then to integrate that into your own experience, right? And it's like, okay, you don't need to go out there and become a personal trainer and a health coach and a therapist, and you don't have to do all that. But there is, I think, something to this strategy of just knowing to occasionally, if you're so over-identified and emotionally involved in your own experience that you can't even see straight and you can't get yourself to act in alignment with your own values, to think about it as you are someone else. You know, what would you say or do if you were someone else, and then apply that to you yourself? And that's why, again, a lot of this is ultimately about self-compassion. Okay, so now that all of that came out, here's the next bit I want to share in terms of a follow-up thought and reflection. That is, when I reached out, like I said, I wanted to get consent for my client to share her story from the retreat. And about how, you know, she was like, I'm going to go home and cook. And then was like, I don't have any of the things that I need to actually do that. When I asked her if I could share it, she said, of course. And also, she reminded me of another thing that came up at the retreat. And I'm going to share it with you because this was her kind of metaphor that she came up with and shared. But also when I reached out to her last week, she mentioned to me that this is something she keeps coming back to and keeps supporting her. So I think it's a really, really great metaphor that can be very helpful. What she said, I'm just going to read the message I got from her directly. She said, I also really like the analogy of looking at the travel brochure as the preparation phase, and then going to the travel agent next, and then booking the travel, and then packing, and then going. To me, that's a really good metaphor I still use in my head now. And so this is brilliant, okay? This specific client of mine has such a way of coming up with these really, really awesome visuals and metaphors. And so I wanted to just share that one with you also as you're thinking about where you are in the stages of change. If you think about it like travel agent, or like the experience of working with a travel agent or planning a trip, it's like you can't go from pre-contemplation to action. You can't go from not thinking about a trip to being on a trip. But that's very often, again, how we expect ourselves to do behavior change. And that's why it's not working. So if that travel agent analogy works for you, hang on to that and notice where you are with it. Okay, so the other point that I need to very much clarify, though honestly at this point it probably goes without saying, like I hope that it's needless to say, but I'm listening to the last one and I'm like, no, I have to actually say this out loud. Okay, that is, when I'm talking about drawing awareness to, being mindful of, telling the truth about, turning toward, looking at, all of that, right? The first step of tender and fierce self-compassion is mindfulness. And the way to effectively get yourself out of pre-contemplation and into contemplation, so to start moving through the stages of change, is to become aware, become aware, become aware, become aware. It's all about awareness. What I hope is needless to say, but also needs to be said, is this is very decidedly not just awareness. It is non-judgmental awareness, okay? Because if what you're doing is drawing awareness to your current situation, your behaviors, the way you're treating yourself or talking to yourself or whatever it is, you're eating or exercising, if what you're doing is drawing awareness to it, and then your awareness is judgmental, and now you're using the practice of drawing awareness to yourself and these behaviors as another way to beat yourself up and shame yourself and perpetuate the story that you suck and you're a piece of shit and you'll never get anywhere. If that is what the experience of drawing awareness to yourself is like, you can bet your ass you are not going to get anywhere because this is what happens, okay? If you are drawing awareness to yourself and you're starting to really look at it, but you're not doing it in a compassionate and loving way, if you're doing it in a judging, shaming way, you are now creating the energy of fear, and shame is a paralyzing force, and you can't move through that because now you're running from a predator, and you're because of your survival brain, your priority now is now escaping the predator, not making behavior change. So you've lost the plot completely when your awareness is judgmental. Now you're stuck. You're actually keeping yourself exactly where you are if you are becoming aware in a judgmental way. And so this, again, it feels like it needs to be clarified, because if what you're doing is saying, no, I'm becoming aware, I'm drawing the awareness to myself, like I'm a total piece of shit and I completely suck. It's like, no, that's actually not how to do it. That is definitely, decidedly exactly what you don't want to do. And so the practice is not the hardest part. In fact, I think is not drawing awareness to, but it's drawing awareness to without judging, shaming, critiquing, blaming, pathologizing. That's the hard part, because what a lot of us are used to doing is drawing the awareness to, but, then falling into the story of shame and blame. And then that's why we get stuck. So draw the awareness to yourself, your behaviors, do your honest inventory. Pros and cons, how are things affecting you? What are the consequences of your choices and decisions? But this is not where you're asking yourself these questions because you're against yourself. You're asking yourself these questions and you're proceeding with compassionate curiosity. It's not just curiosity, it is compassionate curiosity, so that you can actually start to do things about it. You want to do it from the energy of, we're on the same team, You are on the same team with you. And in order for you to get somewhere, you have to start with honesty and truth telling. And yeah, that's really hard, but do not make this another way that you get to beat yourself up, because then you're stuck. Physiologically, it is essentially that simple. It's not easy. I know this is not easy. This is really, really hard stuff, because you have to rewire your brain as you're doing it. This is uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar. I know it's not easy, but it's very simple. It's very simple. Draw the awareness to yourself honestly, tell the truth, and do it with compassion. Do it with curiosity. Do it because you're on the same team with you. And again, if it feels like this is not possible or doable, this is where it is extremely helpful to have another person on board with you, to work with a coach, to have a therapist, to have another human being there. That, like I said last time, the experience I had with Zach, my coach, where it's like having someone to sit with you to model what it's like to be loving toward yourself where you are as you are. Because unless you're doing that, unless you're in acceptance, you're in resistance. And if you're not in, ultimately, if you're not in love and you're in fear and shame, you can't move very far. So all of this, again, is with the intention and the purpose of helping you go where you want to go. You have to not be judgmental about it. Okay, so now that you are non-judgmentally aware, the other thing that I think is very important to say and clarify about this is, before you can get, as we have discussed, before you can go breezing past the first 3 stages of change into action, there's a lot that needs to happen. And so now you have moved out of pre-contemplation, so you're no longer in like complete denial, and you're actually starting to look at some things. And then you might wonder, how do we get to contemplation? And then how do we get from contemplation to preparation? And what I want to add here about all of this is, when you become aware, there is such an urgency. I've talked about the habitual sense of urgency that I think many of us carry and are not aware of, but there is an urgency that is like, okay, I became aware. I know what I want to change. I know what I want to be different. I know what I want to do about it. I'm aware. So now it's time for action. And what I want to say is that as part of the contemplation stage, if I had to nail down like where I would place it, as part of the contemplation stage, and really hear me when I say this, You're not even in the preparation stage yet. You're in contemplation. What I want you to think about is that you are pairing your non-judgmental awareness with the marination stage. Ooh, I like that. Okay, so think about it this way. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, marination, preparation. Because I think what's true is that you're not even necessarily going to go from contemplation to preparation without marination. And this is where it's like back to this idea of resolving ambivalence. When you're in the contemplation stage, you're thinking about it, but you're not doing it. You have ideas, but you're not moving on it. But the important thing about this part is that it's marinating. And a lot of y'all don't want to marinate. You want to prepare. You want to go from the idea and the contemplating to the preparing. And you're skipping over what I am calling the marination stage. And this is why this is so important, okay? You become aware of something. This is another like epiphany that I had one time when I was doing shrooms, which is how it's like real capital T truth in my opinion. Was I had this like awareness. I had this epiphany, this aha moment that of exactly what I'm saying to you, which is you become aware of something. And then it's so habitual for us to say, okay, I'm aware of it. Now, what do I do about it? And what I want to say to you is instead of what do I do about it, this is all an invitation to say, be aware and let it marinate. When you find yourself saying, I'm aware of the thing, what do I do? Replace that with, I'm aware of the thing, now I marinate. Now I marinate. Now I just let it sit. I let it settle. And I think about like, sometimes I say this in a meditation where you sit still and it's kind of like like a snow globe. Like you just shook up a snow globe. Like think about you having an awareness and you drawing the awareness non-judgmentally to yourself and your own behaviors as like shaking up a snow globe. Like, oh God, here's this thing. Here's this thing that I want to fix or change or work on or stop doing or start doing or whatever. Here's an awareness. And it's like you're shaken up energetically. Again, you can't see this happening, but this is what's happening. Your system is like shaken up by you turning toward rather than away from something. And then here you are trying to rush the dust settling. And it's like that isn't how it works. The next step, the next right action is to say, I've become aware of this thing. Now I marinate. Now I let it go. Now I let it sink in. And like literally think about, I'm visualizing this as I'm thinking about these ideas. It's like, have you ever marinated food? If you ever marinated like a meat or something, if you marinate something, you can't rush that process. Like you can't, this is where you don't have control, is the part where it sinks in. And then it starts to, and this is why it's so important to do this and allow this before you get to preparation, because you can go from contemplating to preparing, but if you don't let it marinate first, this is the thing about the marination stage is that this is where you get ideas about what preparation needs to look like. Okay, this is where some of it comes from. So part of it is, okay, this is where, you might be like, okay, I want to change this behavior. And without urgency, without panic, you're letting it marinate, you're letting it sink in, you're just kind of letting it hang out in your consciousness because you're not denying it anymore. You're coexisting with it. And this is where you start to get ideas about, I did hear that podcast with that girl who she feels like she knows what she's, maybe I'll reach out to her. Like, and I'm not trying to like, this is not me trying to get you psychologically to be like, let's do some coaching. But like, this is where you find yourself being like, okay, yeah, so I do want to start cooking, but maybe I should get a cookbook. Or it's like, all right, I want to start exercise. Oh, right. I should probably get a pair of sneakers. Like, it's not coming from this urgent, frantic, scarcity, lack, fear place. These are the things that start to come to you when you let it marinate. Let it marinate, okay? But the thing that I think is so important about this is, again, this is the part you don't have control over. You can't push it. You can't rush it. This is where you do your part. You draw the awareness to your behaviors. You do your honest inventory about your behaviors, your choices, decisions, actions, and how they are impacting you. You start taking responsibility for the fact that you're causing some of your own harm and suffering. Sure, you're doing all of that non-judgmentally. And then once you become aware of this stuff, you did your part. You did your part. And now it's time to practice releasing the reins, practice surrender, and not needing to know what comes next. You don't need to know what comes next. You don't need to know what preparation looks like. You don't need to know what action looks like. You're not there yet. Where you are some of the time is contemplating and marinating. And again, the reason this matters to me is because this is where you practice co-creation. This is where you practice co-creating your behavior change. So when people say, trust the process, I used to hate it when people would say, trust the process. Like, I saw, I think it was like a tweet or something recently that I love because it's so relatable, where it's like, does the process know that I'm trusting it? Like, can it do what I want it to do already? But this is why we say trust the process. But now again, we're talking about trust. We're talking about faith. We're talking about belief. We're talking about you doing your part and then co-creating and not knowing what comes next and allowing things to just kind of drop in, allowing yourself to be guided to the next phase, allowing yourself to have ideas that aren't being forced, allowing yourself to have creative solutions that are not coming from willpower necessarily, like from again, force, the energy of you need to do this and everything's on a timeline and it's urgent and it's frantic. And no, because that's all the energy of fear and it's not going to be sustainable. So ultimately, what I'm saying to you for the 1 billionth time is that this is necessarily a spiritual approach because you are a spiritual being and it has to be. It has to be if you want it to feel safe, in my opinion, because what we're doing is we are contemplating, we're marinating, we're letting the ideas come, right? And this is where I think I said before, pray and move your feet. Another thing I got from Elise Shunkowitz, pray and move your feet. You move your feet, you do your part. But again, okay, this is also what's so important, is a lot of you doing your part, a lot of you, quote unquote, moving your feet, is the first 3 stages of change where you, if you're judging yourself only based on what you can see and the action you're taking in the outer physical dimension, it's not happening. Like, you're not even seeing it. You're invisible. And so what all of this comes down to is that if you're doing your part and you're moving your feet for the first 3 stages of change, you're not going to see your feet moving. Right? Just like I said last time, just because you don't see movement doesn't mean you're not moving. So you have to know that as you are drawing the awareness to yourself non-judgmentally, and you're letting it all marinate, and you're just kind of giving yourself the time and space to process what it is you're becoming aware of, that is you moving your feet. That is you moving your feet. And then the other part is the quote unquote praying. So you move your feet by saying, okay, I'm willing to become aware of this and tell the truth about it. That's moving your feet. You're not seeing your feet moving, right? Because your feet are moving internally. And then you quote unquote pray. You let it marinate. You say, you know what? I don't know what to do about this yet. And this is why I think it's so powerful, the story I told of my therapist last time where she said, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it yet. And sometimes I find that now the way that I live my life, even yesterday, today's Saturday. Yesterday, I had therapy. And I asked my therapist a question, and this is how she answered. I told her, I even said in my session yesterday, I was like, I teach this shit all the time. And sometimes it's so hard to see in my own self, in my own experience. And ultimately what her answer to me was this, that is, let it marinate. You don't need to know what to do. You're not in a place of action yet. What you need to do is just let yourself stay present with this conversation. Let yourself continue to think about this. And it's like literally everything I'm saying to you right now is just be with it. Just let yourself be with it. You moved your feet by having the conversation, by doing the honest inventory, by drawing the awareness to yourself, and now you pray. You release, you surrender, and then things will come to you. Okay. But this is also like, you ever notice your best ideas come when you're not trying? Like your best ideas come to you when you're like you're taking a shower and you're like falling asleep, or you wake up first thing in the morning, like before you get into the state of, I have to figure it all out, and this like clenching and tightening and fear and scarcity energy and physiology. When you're not in that place, right? That's when all your best ideas come to you very often. And the reason is this: you're letting it just marinate. And very often, this is how you could probably tell so much of this podcast series has been created, is I'll listen to some of it and then I just like go for a walk and I'm like, oh wait, also this. And then I go back to my walk and I'm listening to music and I'm like, oh, and also this. And that's where a lot of this comes from. I'm not sitting here, with a Google Doc in front of me being like, okay, I need to perfect all of my thoughts. And what if I say the wrong thing and it's not in perfect order? That's how the first few podcast episodes were, but that was years ago. And so now it's just this is how you stay making changes, but co-creating. Okay, so you don't have total control, you have partial control, not just of your mind-body system, not just of the human experience, but exactly and importantly, the same is true for behavior change and the stages of change. You have partial control. You don't have all the control. You're co-creating all of it. Okay. All right, so I have to be honest with you. I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one more kind of concept to chew on right now. And then the next episode, I'm going to come back and really, really break it down in more detail. Because if I put everything in this episode that I wanted to originally, I will be here for another hour. And I just can't do that. So what I want to share with you, it's come up on this podcast before, I believe. I've talked about it in my coaching program, and I've definitely taught it at retreats. But as we're here talking about behavior change, and most importantly, I think, behavior change from a co-creation standpoint, let's talk about HILA. HILA. HILA stands for high involvement, low attachment. And this is in some way another way to say that you pray and move your feet, and that you do your part, you take your partial control and you exercise that power, and then you hand it over to God and the universe and whatever else, and you just kind of let that part do its part. So high involvement, low attachment. So high involvement, low attachment. What does this mean? Well, in order for you to make change and have it be, again, sustainable and feeling safe, you do need to be highly involved. You have to be highly involved. This is not going to happen by itself. You want to change your behaviors, whether it's the way you're eating or exercising or anything else, or you want to change your internal dialogue and the way that you're in relationship with yourself. The point with high involvement is it's not going to happen by itself. You have to be highly involved. And I say this too when it comes specifically to intentional weight loss. Like, I think sometimes there's this expectation that you start practicing self-compassion and the weight just falls off your body. And some of the time that is true. And also a lot of the time that's not true. You have to be highly involved. You have to make things happen that you want to happen. And so high involvement, the HI part of HILA, is about doing your part. You can't be a passive bystander in your own life and in your own health and in your own relationships. And you can't be passive, ultimately. If you want things to change, you want things to happen, you have to actively be making them happen, okay? You have to be highly involved. And this is where you're moving through the stages of change. You are contemplating, you're marinating, you're preparing. All of this requires you to be involved. And then you have to take action, and your maintenance and your relapse, and you're moving through it. This is you being highly involved. Notice that, okay? And so that's the part. Now, the low attachment part is what's challenging. Low attachment is where we say, I did my part, and whatever happens next is whatever happens next. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I can't control this. This is the low attachment part. And this is where it gets challenging, because a lot of us are very good at and very familiar with high involvement and high attachment. Sure, I'll be highly involved, I'll make shit happen, but then it needs to go exactly how I need it to go. I'm highly involved and I'm highly attached. And that doesn't work, and it also doesn't feel very good. And the reason for that, let's look at this through the lens of the mind-body system and physiology and energy. The reason that that doesn't work and it doesn't feel good is because when you are highly involved and highly attached, this ultimately becomes the I'll be happy when trap, which to your mind-body system is I'll be safe when. So usually what this looks like is you did your part, you made your plan and preparation, and you're marinating, and maybe you're in action and you're taking action, you're highly involved, but because you're highly attached to the outcome, it becomes perceived as I am not safe until I get this desired outcome. I'm so involved, I'm doing my part, I'm taking action, and until I see the result I want to see, I am not okay. I am not okay, I'm not happy, I'm ultimately, again, whether you're conscious of it or not, what that becomes is I am not safe here. And so if you're highly attached, ultimately what you're doing, not intentionally and very likely not mindfully, is you're creating this kind of dichotomy of if I'm taking action and I'm not yet at my goal, or I don't yet see the result or the outcome that I want, then I don't feel safe. And then that's unsustainable because you don't feel safe. So if you're highly attached to the outcome, you are creating essentially the energy of danger, fear, threat, scarcity, lack, whatever it is, in the present moment. And that's why high involvement, high attachment is not what we're going for. We are going for high involvement, low attachment. So low attachment, this is where you practice non-attachment. And so the example that I think of very often to embody this is the college application process. And I think about this, or I remember thinking about this, because as I was applying to schools for my doctorate program, I was teaching about HILA, and I was like, this is a great example of this. So for me to get into school, I had to be highly involved. And think about this, like, again, I think about college. Like, if you have a college in mind that you want to get into, you've got to be highly involved in making that happen. It's not going to happen by itself. You can't just like breeze through school and not pay any attention to your grades. It's not going to you have to be highly involved in getting yourself to your goal, in achieving what you want to achieve and accomplish. So you got to be highly involved. So you get your grades, you take your SATs or whatever other bullshit that you have to do, you do extracurriculars, and you build your resume, and you get your letters of recommendation. You have to make all of those things happen to even give yourself a chance of getting to the final end goal. Okay, so you're highly involved. You did your part. Now, you've put your whole application together, and then you've submitted it. You had to be highly involved to do all of that. Now you get to practice low attachment, because what happens next is not up to you. You don't have control over it. There is a lot of uncertainty. There is unpredictability. You are very likely emotionally uncomfortable at this point. You have fears and doubts and concerns. And guess what you can do about it? Feel it. It's not nothing. It's not you can't do anything. It's just these are the moments where you say, God, I'm so nervous. Like, I really want to get in. And it's okay, yeah, and I'm scared that I won't. Okay, that is so valid. And there is nothing more for you to do right now. You did your part. You were highly involved. Now you've got to take your energy elsewhere. So when I talk about high-low, when I talk about being in low attachment, sometimes the follow-up question is like, but how? How do I do that? Like, oh, I'm so eager to find out the answer. I'm so scared because I'm so uncertain. How do you practice low attachment? And I'm going to give you the the real, again, kind of granular way that I think about this, the example that I think of is like, once you've submitted your application to college and you know that it's going to be like weeks or months before you find out, well, you could either check your email, you could refresh your email inbox every 5 seconds for the next 6 months, or you can check your email when you check your email, knowing that when you get notified, you get notified. You can't control it. This is not operating on your timeline. It might be inconvenient and uncomfortable for you, but shit, there's nothing you can do about it. This is just the way of it. This is how the process works. And so this is where you get to choose. Are you living your life as though you are highly involved and highly attached, meaning you've submitted your application and now you just cannot sleep, you cannot breathe, you cannot function because all you can think about is the outcome? Or are you practicing low attachment, where you were highly involved, you recognize you did everything you can, and now you get back to living your life? And here's why this matters, again, from a mind-body, physiological, energetic perspective. If you're highly attached and you essentially are not living in the present moment anymore because all you can do is think about the future and the outcome, you are no longer here now. And so again, it's not intentional, but what ends up happening is that your brain on some level believes that you are not safe until you get into that college. Or not even that, it's that you are not safe until you get the decision back. Either way, that you need to know. You're highly attached and you can't function, you can't be present, you're not safe until you get the result or the outcome. And the truth is that's not true. You are safe to live your life. And that's why it is so important that if you have the option between checking your email every 5 seconds to practicing surrender and release and not having total control, you get to go out and live your life. You get to say, I'll get the email when I get the email, but in the meantime, I want to hang out with my friends. I want to go, do whatever else that you want to do with your life and be present in the moment, allowing yourself to think about something other than that outcome. Now what you're doing is creating the energy of safety, because what you're doing is communicating to your brain that you can be here now. It is safe for you to be here now. And that is why it is so powerful and so important to be practicing HILA, high involvement, low attachment / co-creation / pray and move your feet, however you want to think about it, contemplate and marinate, and then prepare. This is all how the process of behavior change really needs to not just look on the surface, but feel energetically in order for it to be, again, safe and sustainable. And then one of the notes, like I'm just reading this in real time, that I wrote when I was first kind of putting this together and thinking about it was, it's like you're on a roller coaster. You're on a roller coaster of the human experience. Whether you grip to the handlebars for dear life or throw your hands up in the air and just enjoy it is entirely up to you. So ultimately, whether you are highly attached or lowly attached, that's where you get to choose to live your life and be in the present moment and feel safe where you are, even if it's uncomfortable. And the other thing I wrote is we want to grip to the handlebars for a sense of control. And that is super valid. It's like when you're highly attached and all you can think about is the outcome, part of the reason that becomes so habitual and so addictive and compulsive and so hard to navigate your way out of is because it feels like you have control, right? It's like, well, I can't make the decision committee get back to me any sooner, but at least I could think about it over and over again. It's like, it feels like it's the only thing we can do when we don't have total control. And so it's valid. It's valid that that's how we want to respond and react. It's valid that that's what we want to do. And that control, or it doesn't really exist. That's the whole point, is that it's the illusion of control. And all it's really doing is that it's hurting us. It's creating pain and discomfort because now we're not living our life. We're not living in the present moment. We don't feel safe to go out and do the things we want to do and enjoy ourselves because we are so attached. And so that's the way you want to think about it, is you can validate that it's really hard to stop thinking about it, that it's really hard to get your mind to do something else, that it can be really, really challenging to be present in the moment when all you can think about is the future. Validate that, honor that. It's okay. Of course it is. You want this thing. And also, can you practice being non-attached to it? Which is, again, if in the meantime, before I get to the next episode, in the meantime, you need a reminder of how to do that, you just come back to the present moment. And that could be getting engaged in an activity that, is creative so that you're in the present moment, but it could be hanging out with people, it could be listening to music, it could be feeling the breath move through your body, it could be exercising, it could be anything. Taste the food you're eating. Anything where you're practicing mindfulness and activating your senses and being present in your body in the moment. That's how you practice low attachment. So you're highly involved, you're lowly attached. And that is, again, another foundational concept when it comes to safe and sustainable behavior change. So, having said all of that, in the next episode, I hope, what I want to do, which was my intention for today in some ways, is to break this down again even more so that you have an even better idea of what it looks like and how you can practice it. So that is what we have to look forward to. And then everything else that comes along with it. So at this point, I mean, like I said last time, I really do love teaching all this stuff. But, it's true what they say that what is it that they say about when you are having fun? Time flies. That's it. Time flies when you're having fun. The other thing I was thinking of is like, when you love what you do, you never work a day in your life, that kind of stuff. So same idea. Like I sit here and I put all this together and I'm like, how is it already? Oh, but here we are again at an hour and 11 minutes. So magical numbers. But it's like, wow, I feel like I've been talking for 15 minutes. So anyway, it's super fun to be here. And thank you for coming. I hope that this is serving you positively and supporting you. And I will be back next week with more of the same. So have the best week of your whole life. I love you so, so much. Rate and review and subscribe to the pod if you have not yet. And that's it. See you next time. Mwah.